All right, good evening. Welcome to Looper Talk. My name is Tim Palmer, and tonight we're going to talk about the official World Golf Rankings and LIV. As of recently, the LIV Tour has gained an OWGR, is what we'll call it. They have gained some ranking points, which is interesting. We'll talk about what is the situation, what happened. We'll then discuss what the OWGR is, and then we will finish off with my thoughts and what I think is really going on. So for those who don't know, LIV and the PGA Tour are two separate professional leagues, and then you also have the DP Tour, which is, I think, partly associated with the PGA Tour, where they're more congruent. They work more together. The LIV got introduced in 2021, and they paid a couple of the superstars on the PGA Tour to be a part of their golf league or organization, however you want to call it, and that created sort of a fracture between the two, the PGA Tour and the LIV. And so ever since then, the two have kind of, I wouldn't say fought back and forth. I think because the PGA Tour has more relevance and they have more, they've been around since the 1970s, where the LIV just started 4 or 5 years ago. So there's always been a little bit of a tussle between the two, but the LIV has some really qualified players that are major winners: Bryson, DeChambeau, John Rahm. So there's a very qualified part of that organization, obviously, as well as the PGA Tour. And so recently what has came about is the official World Golf Rankings. They have given LIV some availability to gain some points. According to what I read on social media, in order to get ranking points through a LIV tournament, you have to finish in the top 10, which I find that very interesting because on the PGA Tour, that is not the case. Let's talk about the OWGR, what they are, and what's significant about it. So in order to gain world ranking points, the tournament has to be strictly stroke play. It has to be 72 holes. There has to be a cut at 36 holes, and they like to see a minimum requirement of players. On average, I would guess around 70 to 75 players would be a big enough field to get these ranking points. And so you're probably asking yourself, well, why do we care to get rankings? These rankings help a lot because they can get you into major tournaments. They can give you exemptions into some bigger non-major tournaments, and they can help you gain access to, say, some DP Tour events and other stuff like that. And so the higher ranked you are on this organization, the more access you have to play for bigger purses. And obviously, as we know, if we have more access to bigger purses, I then have more access to money. And that's where it all stems from. It's very much congruent with the higher I ranked up on this organization, the better chances I have to create a lifestyle from the game of golf. Where there's some conflict here, and this is where we'll kind of pivot from just speaking about the organization. So within the OWGR, you have a panel board that justifies which tournaments are ranked or which organizations deserve to be ranked and who do not. And so as of right now, we have a non-voting chairman, Trevor Immelman. We have the executive director of Augusta National, Will Jones. We have the general manager of the Global Tour Relationship, Nick Datsey. Not sure who that is. The PGA Tour the PGA European Tour Group, Guy Kennings. He is the chief executive officer. We have the PGA of America Chief Championships Officer, Kerry Howe, or Hay, Haigh. We have the PGA Tour Commissioner, Jay Monahan. The RNA Chief Executive Director, Mark Darbin. and the Chief Executive Officer of the USGA, Mike Wan. And so this is, to me, where I'm going to get into the juice of all this, because I feel like there's a conflict of interest. First off, nobody from LIV is associated on this governing board. Totally understandable, because the organization's only been around for 4 years, so they're very new. Maybe that has something to do with them. Since they are new, they haven't really had time to modify, which as of lately, so the LIV Tour, I forgot to mention, so the LIV Tour played 54-hole tournaments, and so there was a technicality there, and I think that was a big reason why they weren't getting these OWGR rankings. But I believe as of recently, they have switched to 72-hole events, and they did this in light of trying to gain these points. Again, because if these professionals gain these points, they then have more access to bigger tournaments, which then financially can benefit them more. And to sort of tie in on that, some of the players are not very happy about that. I think Bryson recently commented and said that's not what they signed up for. So there's a lot of back and forth underlying tones or stuff they're not going to tell the media, but I think there's a lot of things not being said publicly right now that I'm going to try to create awareness to, because again, there's a huge conflict of interest here, because you have the commissioner of the PGA Tour and you have the PGA of America chief executive, right? And so before I explain why this is a conflict of interest, I want to read to you their mission statements. Okay, so this is the PGA Tour's mission statement. By showcasing golf's greatest players, we engage, inspire, and positively impact our fans, partners, and communities worldwide. And this is the PGA of America's mission statement. It's obviously to serve its PGA members. I don't want to get into that part of the mission statement. I want to get into this part, the second part, which is to grow interest, participation, and enjoyment of the game of golf for players and communities. So what we can gather from that is both organizations want to create a positive influence in the golf community, and rightfully so. In order for us to grow this game and to continue to make money off of participation in tournaments, we need to have a positive influence. That's very obvious. But what I'm having a hard time is, you are now sort of gatekeeping who's allowed to have world ranking points and who's not. What you have is you have part of this governing board that is part of these organizations that are gaining from these professionals, and they're using sort of a system with, again, the OWGR is that system to rank these players. And so now you have a new league, the LIV Golf Tour, who has shown up, and it's taken you 4 years, which I know there's technicalities there, but at the end of the day, how can we not see this as a entity that is picking and choosing which tours should be ranked? When the LIV Golf Tour, we have multiple players that have won major championships, which, as we know in the golf world, those tournaments, those are where the best of the best show up to play. And we can't think that because they're not ranked in this OWGR system that they're not valid players or they're not good enough to be ranked, because we're seeing that on the governing board, we have people that are associated with opposing organizations from LIV that are somewhat dictating how this system works. And that, to me, creates an environment that is sort of like gatekeeping in a way, because you're not really following your mission statements on trying to create a positive influence. You're more or less trying to create a positive influence as long as it benefits you. And that's I think that's ridiculous. And the reason why I find all this ridiculous is because if there's a tournament at the end of the PGA Tour season. It's called the Hero World Challenge, and it's Tiger Woods' tournament. It's only 20 players, maybe 25. I think it's only 20 players. and it's officially ranked. It's a part of the OWGR. It's part of the PGA Tour, but there is no cut. And yes, it's 72 holes, but according to the OWGR, in order for it to be ranked, there has to be a cut. And the average size of these tournaments tend to be around 75 players. So how can we have a tournament like the Hero World Challenge that goes against some of these OWGR rules, and yet we're not going to allow LIV to have a full ranking system because they simply don't play 72 holes, which I think now they've changed. But even before, why are we kind of making the rules up as we go? Again, I find that very hypocritical, especially from the PGA Tour's perspective, because you have your own commissioner who's a part of that board, but yet how can you think that there's not a conflict of interest there, and how he's not, again, dictating these rankings to his favor? And a lot of these up and coming players, they want to get on that OWGR because the young guys, the grinders, not the superstars, they already understand and they made their money. But you have these young people that have made the tour, that are invested in it, and yet you're going to take opportunity away from some of these LIV players that are on the same spectrum, all because of the organization that they chose, instead of it being a very structured governing body that's fair to everybody. And I just find this very counterintuitive to their mission statements. And what I also find non-appealing with all this is we're being very selective on which tournaments deserve the rankings and which tournaments don't. And it's not really based upon these governing rules. What it's based upon is, oh, well, you're not a part of this organization, so therefore you don't deserve that. And I don't understand why we can have those motives combined and still think that they're going to be conducive for a positive influence. I think the average cost for a tour player on the PGA Tour is between $150,000 to $250,000. That's including travel, food, the necessities to get to these tournaments and to participate. And again, to get into these higher end tournaments, you have to compete in tournaments that have the OWGR ranking system. And so why are we going to kind of disavow a 4-year-old golf league that has qualified players that have won major tournaments against PGA Tour players, but because they're not doing it a certain way, or they're not part of an organization that's part of the governing board, we're just going to throw them in the dirt? But then the PGA Tour will have a Hero World Challenge that has 20 players in it, and there's no cut, and yet they'll give those players rankings. And you can say all you want that that's the best of the best. It's not, because again, you have players on the LIV Tour that have won majors against these players that get invited to the Hero World Challenge. So we know it's not. LIV has some of the best players in the world. PGA Tour has some of the best players in the world. The DP Tour as well. And at some point, we need to combine forces, and we need to realize what we're doing. And to have this selective mentality and to gatekeep who's allowed to get world ranking points, all you're doing is you're hurting your reputation, and you're not really following your mission statements at all. But yet you expect people to want to watch your tournaments, to give you all the respect you deserve, and that there's no way those two can work together. And so I think what we can take from this is the PGA Tour, to me, is desperate. They are desperate to maintain that high-end relevance of what they had through the Tiger era, and that's what it ties down to. And they will make the rules up as they go. They do not care who's involved or what's involved. All they really care about is making sure that themselves are gaining money from whatever situation it is. And again, this is partly why we let Brooks in my opinion, because they want a story, they want to create controversy, they need something to spark interest back in the league. And so I find that very frustrating because I understand LIV is a different environment. They're playing music, they do a shotgun start. It's not your traditional stroke play events in a way because there's a team portion to it. But at the end of the day, if our mission statement is to create a positive influence in the golf world, well, we need to be very strict on the rules, sure, but we need to make sure that if organizations are following these rules to an extent, we need to let them in. And if I have tournaments that don't follow the rules as well or follow these governing bodies and what they justify deserves rankings, then those tournaments don't deserve the OWGR as well. I don't care what organization you're a part of or what tour you're playing in. We need to create accessibility for these younger guys that are grinding it out to give themselves a legit chance to make a career. And it's very selective. And I think what we need to realize is it's more about how can we financially gain from all this. And that's just the end goal. And the PGA Tour will make the rules up as they go. They do not care whose feelings they hurt. And I believe Phil Mickelson was right the whole time. I think they are just greedy people that want to fill their pockets at the end of the day. And people are going to say, well, life's not fair. That's just not, who gives a shit? And I'm like, well, think about these young kids, we have a young guy. Oh, he's not young, but he's mid-30s. He's off and on the PGA Tour. Sure, he was struggling to make some cuts, but he won an event, and you're now suspended him for, I think, indefinitely, or I'm not sure how long, but you suspended him for playing a 9-hole event on a YouTube channel that was associated with LIV. But then a year and a half later, you let a player in that took the money from LIV, took, I would think, a good 100 million maybe, and you let him back in the tour no problem because he's won majors? But yet now we're not even going to give LIV official golf world rankings because why? Because they're not. I mean, the PGA Tour has no excuse for this because they have a tournament at the end of the year where some of that tournament does not fit the guidelines of the OWGR, and it should not be an official ranked event, but for some reason it is. And it's kind of shitty on the PGA Tour. I think it's very counterproductive, and it's not going to. I think when people start to realize what's really going on, I think it's eventually going to bite them in the ass. So let me see if I have any other notes. I think that was pretty much it for me. Yeah, it's pretty simple. There's a gatekeeping element here, and we need to honestly be more strict on what the OWGR is, and we need to treat every organization the same. And if you don't have a certain amount of players, if it's not a 72-hole event, and if there's not a cut after 36 holes, then it shouldn't be ranked, period. And again, you do have some arguments with LIV because they don't have a cut. Everyone participates all 4 days. So maybe LIV can start to maybe create a cut that way and still pay the players that get cut, but then the team element kind of goes away. So what we could do, maybe instead of thinking that the OWGR needs to be strict on their rules, I think they need to modify their rules and allow certain associations or certain tours, to get ranked, and maybe understand that if we're here to create a positive influence in the game, some things just have to change, and we just can't make the rules up as we go. We need to really figure out how to create a system that still allows these young grinders, these young pros, access to this world golf rankings. So yeah, I found that very interesting, especially with Jay Monahan on the governing board of the OWGR. How do you think you really think he's just going to not have some sort of interest on, okay, I'm not going to let LIV have these rankings, because the minute I have LIV, then my major tournaments on my tour is going to be filled with LIV players. And I don't want that, because I want my players that are pushing equity in my organization, I want them to have that access, because we're promising them this equity piece, and I want my players happy. I don't want them mad at me, because I don't want to lose my job. So I don't know. It's very back and forth. Again, the PGA Tour makes up the rules as they go, and that's a survival tactic to me. And the LIV is not. LIV is down $1 billion, and I think they have some investments in the DP Tour and the PGA Tour. From what I heard, the PIF or whatever it is. So I don't know. I think what really needs to happen is things need to merge. We need to allow official golf world rankings for every LIV tournament, for every player. We need to modify the rules of the OWGR. We need to maybe take the cut thing out. 72 holes, fine, but make it where only the top half of the tournament gets ranked. Even if there isn't a cut, fine. You say half the field is what deserves the rankings. And that way the LIV players can still participate in all 4 days like they've originated, but they know that if they finish in the bottom half of the pack, they're not getting ranked. The PGA Tour can still do cuts. Everybody's happy. So, but yeah, thanks for listening. Thanks for listening, Looper Talk. Appreciate all the support lately. I'm going to have some sweatshirts made soon. That'll be cool. So, and I'm going to start doing some interviews. I got a few people online a few people in line trying to do it, and I think that'd be fun. I'm going to start getting some stories out there and have some conversations, and create some awareness that way. So, yeah, thanks again for listening, and don't forget, lighten your bags, 200 to strap. Y'all have a good night.